Good morning, Indakana. My name is Rhonda Bisson. I'm from Whitefield, New Hampshire. You are listening to Moccasin Tracks.
Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya. Chantanea, hey, hey. Chantanea, hey, hey. Chantanea, hey, hey.
You are listening to Moccasin Tracks. My name is Deborah Rigger. We are a visitor to Turtle Island, moving with decolonization and re-indigenizing with Earth as mother and all life as family. We acknowledge this area as Indakina, the ancestral homeland of the Abenaki peoples.
You are listening to Moccasin Tracks.
And welcome, Jean Morningstar Cat, to Moccasin Tracks. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, cool. Your volume's a little low. Bring it up as high as you can.
Let's see. Okay.
There you go. I got you now. We hear you.
Okay.
So can you see us? It's fun to have a conversation.
Yes.
Using this format so we can talk to each other and see each other. Rick.
Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
Good. I think I just. Oh, there we go. I lose you. I find. I'll get it. I'll get it all together.
All right.
There we go.
Excellent.
Welcome to Moccasin Tracks.
Yeah. How about that? You know that I used to give a talk on that with that title. It was so funny when I realized that Deb had a radio program by that name.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. That was quite a while ago. I don't do the talks these days.
Yeah. Rick is going to tell our listeners a little bit about you.
And please interrupt if I'm missing something. Excuse me. Jeannie Morningstar Kent is a gourd artist using Wabanaki designs and illustrating the stories of the Wabanaki. She is a member of the Nulhegan Band of Coos Abenaki of Vermont. Jeannie is an author, presenter, and her works are in permanent museum collections and has exhibited widely. She states, although I have made art all my life, I did not find my focus until I began to dedicate myself to our tribal art. Gourds provide a connection to Mother Earth and give me a spiritual centering as I work. I feel the ancestors directing me to leave an Abenaki footprint through my work.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much correct. Yeah.
So, can you tell us what you've been working on lately? Are you currently working on projects or?
I don't do sketchbooks. I sketch in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm doing other things, I'm working, if you want to call it that. I've been gathering materials. There's a non-native artist who does gourds, whose work I like, Marilyn Sutherland. And she has a lot of color, but it's very muted. And I would like that. I would like to add more color to my work. I have been limiting it to what I thought we might have used in our past when we used natural dyes. I had at one time thought of going with natural dyes until I realized how impermanent they are. And I thought, I put all that work in and somebody pays all that money and then it disappears. That would not be a good idea. So I went with commercial dyes, and I have limited my palette. But before I went back went to native work, I was actually a French Impressionist, and that's all about color. And so, in this late stage of the game, I'm kind of hungry for some more color in my work. And I think that it's acceptable at this point to cross the bridge from tradition to modern. I don't live 100 years ago. I live now. And I think that makes it acceptable to um, advance my work, if you will, into another step. And it's been very frustrating in some ways to limit the palette because um, I haven't been able to do some things in illustrations that I would like to do. And I'm still hungry for that show of story gourds. If I ever get there, I've got a bunch of gourds just sitting in storage waiting to be done. But I've been this last year, for the third time in my life, I've been limited in the use of my hands again.
Ooh.
And when I think it was the Brattleboro Lake Champlain had the show on COVID losses. I was notified of it, and I really wanted to honor my sister because I lost her right at the beginning of everything shutting down. And she lives in Maine, and I live in Connecticut, so I couldn't be there. So I really wanted to honor her with a piece of my work. And the doctor said you could only work 10 minutes at a time.
Wow.
So when you see the gourd that's up there, you'll notice that it lacks a lot of detail that you will see in some of my other work because I was so limited and I had to make that deadline. But I absolutely, I think I welled up with tears when Eloise took me by the arm and took me over and showed me that it was used on the banner. And nobody told me that while I was up there, and it just blew me away that they used it because it's the hug.
Sorry to hear about your sister, Jeannie.
Thank you. She was my only sibling. There were just the two of us. She was 6 years older than me, and she'd been sick for a long time. So I don't know if she had COVID, but she had respiratory problems. So it could have been. I don't know. Her daughters were not too forthcoming, but she called me, and you get this call out of nowhere saying I'm dying.
Oh.
And you get to say I love you one really quickly, and she hung up. And later that night, I'm in the living room here by myself. I live alone, and I got this big physical hug.
Wow.
I knew she was gone. I think I have mentioned to Deb that there are minuses and pluses in life, and there seems to be a balance that happens. At the time we think, oh my God, this horrible thing has happened, and how am I going to get through it? And then it may take years of reflection, looking back, and suddenly you realize it happened for a reason. And each time that I've lost the use of my hands, my work has changed. And this time, as I say, I'm interested in the work of Marilyn. She uses oils as opposed to the gourd dyes or acrylics. And so I actually went out and bought myself a small set of oils. And that means more experimentation and a slower finish product out there. Maybe by spring I'll have some. But I'm anxious to see how this goes. They'll still be on gourds because the gourds are the key. Gourds were not initially growing wild here in America or on the northern continent. It's believed that they came up on the tides from South America, and that they were used as fishing floats for the nets, the net floats, and they got loose, which frequently happens, and came up. And of course, our people were any of the tribal people were always anxious to make use of whatever came along, so they planted them. And the only ones that grow wild at all now are the coyote gourd, and they're out west. They're about the size of a baseball, and those people can actually find wild, but all the rest are domesticated.
That's beautiful.
So working with oils, it's conceivable that you may find yourself opening up a whole new creative door for yourself.
I think I will. I started out in oils. My sister gave me my first set of oils, and she gave me a lot of first. She gave me my first set of pastels, my first radio. And my parents built me a little 8x8 building off on the corner of the lot, my first studio, and they ran a cord down to it. Rick, you will enjoy this. They ran a cord from the house to the building. And in the winter, I would be sitting down there. I had a still life light. I had the light to work by and a heater. And of course, you only have 2 plugs, so I had to choose. And when it would get cold and too cold for me to hold my brush, I would sit in the dark and warm up. And then one of the lights and work like mad again until I got cold again.
I'm laughing.
Battery, so that was okay.
I'm laughing partly because you remind me of when I was a teenager living in my parents' chicken coop.
Yeah.
I would play the music too loud, and in the middle of the night, they would turn the breaker off.
I never had that problem because it was fairly close. I had to be careful of that. But yeah, I remember sitting there in the dark waiting to warm. And that happened because I basically did everything on the top bunk. My sister and I shared old Army bunks, and I had the top bunk because I was the younger one. And I had a shelf up there. Being the lower bunk, she didn't get a shelf. I got a shelf. And I would keep my books, my bottle of ink, my pen, my notebooks, and that's where I lived. I really need to write a book about the top bunk. And
that would be great.
Accidentally, I spilled a bottle of ink because I used to do cartooning for my high school paper.
Yes.
And I spilled the bottle of ink, and my mother was livid. No more art. No.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure. I kind of suspect my stepfather might have come to my rescue. He was very laid back and quiet because, he was the stepfather. He wasn't allowed to be too close. But I have a feeling that he's the one who came up with the idea because he liked to have a little space of his own, too. And I think he recognized I needed it. And if if it took away my art, I'd stop breathing. I probably would have been a delinquent. I tell my she's passed on, but my elementary art teacher was all of 4'10". She's a little itty bitty woman. And my art teacher in high school passed away the first semester, so I had no art teacher for high school. And this little lady kept me, she would call me up and have me judge posters for parades, she would get me involved in a competition or a show. And she was the one, my mother was very tight about keeping hands on. She got me away from my mother to take me to my first museum in Hartford.
Oh,
And
wow.
then this was the crown jewel. She got me away for a whole day and took me to New York to put into the Museum Row.
Wow.
I mean, I remember that forever.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was great. She wanted to send me to it was Norwich Free Academy, which used to be an arts high school,
Hmm.
but you lived there. And because it was residential, my mother said no. So I had no art for high school.
Well, you were lucky to have that teacher.
Mhm.
She was a godsend. I told her every time I saw her, I said, you know, if it wasn't for you, I would have been a delinquent. I would have been, because without art, I had no rudder.
Mhm.
That's all you know, art and writing, that's all I cared about.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I started publishing the cartoons and a column in junior high school, continued through high school. So I had another teacher in high school who kept me busy with the cartoons and the column because it was the high school newspaper. But the column also went into the town newspaper, so I had to be.
Nice.
And so that's where the writing kept up. So that was Miss Sheldrick, and I had to thank her for that. Neither of those ladies was married. They just dedicated their lives to students.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, true teachers, true.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's funny because Miss Sheldrick was as big as Miss Facher was little. Opposites. Yeah, I've had my saviors along the line, and you know, I like to think I did it by myself, but no, you never do anything by yourself, not truly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then, as far as the Abenaki go, Vera Longtushian is my savior. She came along and asked me to be one of the founding board members on the Abenaki Artists Association.
Nice.
And got me involved with that. And she has kept me involved with shows. And it's gotten so now I can't drive up very much. Now that my husband's passed, he was the driver.
Mhm.
And, I'm turning 80 in 3 weeks, so it's getting very hard to do it alone. But Vera, I will ship things to her, or she'll find someone I can ship them to. They'll put them in the show, and if they don't sell, they'll send them back.
Mhm.
So I have guardian angels up there too.
That's great.
Mhm.
And when my book, when I was working on my book, Mount Kearsarge was fantastic. So was the poor editor at a history press. I didn't know anything about writing a book. And again, that was Vera. She knew I was doing the research. Somebody came by and asked if they knew an Abenaki author, and she pointed him in my direction. I'm like, um, and my pictures, my photographs were not very good. And the poor museum had let me set up a photo booth. They took things out of storage. I mean, they just went above and beyond. What happened? The editor said the photos were not. They didn't have a high enough digital quality. I'm not a photographer, so the language is a little. So I had to do it all over again.
Oh,
And I humbly went to them and explained, and they did it all over again. They said, that's what we're here for. I
wow.
couldn't believe it. Could not believe it.
Wow.
So, here again, you know, I've just had a lot of dumb luck.
Well, as you said that, Jeannie, I'm thinking probably wasn't luck at all. It was probably meant to be.
Well, I do feel some of it is predestined. I do. I was not raised with my culture. As a matter of fact, I was not allowed to speak to my father or his family or anything. I did as an adult because I went searching. You want to know things, you know. You
Right.
want to know what that other half of you is. And because I was raised by our mother. And that's when, I researched the genealogy. And when he passed away, he left a trunk. He belonged to Barnum and Bailey circus at one point. So I had a trunk, and in the trunk were all of his Christian, christening papers, his military papers, everything I needed to get started on that genealogical trail. I mean, it was a godsend. My daughter has the trunk now. She wanted it so bad. I said, "You paint it and you're dead meat. Wait till I'm dead. You can do anything you want to it after I'm dead, but while I'm alive, don't you dare." Barnum and Bailey is not gonna be. Well, I guess they're coming back with a different style circus I saw on TV. No animals, more like kind of a Circus Olay type of circus.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
When he was back there, he always wanted to be a clown. He loved Emmett Kelly, and but he took care of ponies for somebody. There's a picture of him. But that was the problem. He was. I don't think he was raised with the culture either, but he didn't know just how native he was. He would just pick up and take off. And my mother was German. To the spot. And she didn't like us moving around. And the fact that he would just disappear periodically was not very good for trying to run a household or, kids in school and that kind of stuff. So I don't blame either one of them. They were just not meant to be together in the first place. My sister allegedly introduced them. I was born in Indiana. Mom says we all were born in Indiana. And Mom was on a bus. And my sister was very friendly. She was about 5, I guess. And she saw my dad in uniform, went over and kindly introduced herself and introduced my mom. And it led from there. And he was from New England, so that's how we wound up back up here. But yeah, I've been back to Indiana a few times. That's not home for me. In New England is boy. I get out to past Pennsylvania and hit Ohio. I cannot stand those flatlands. Nope. I'm a mountain girl.
Yeah.
So growing up, Jeannie, it sounds like your art was probably pretty important to you as far as being able to, well, I can relate to this, like taking yourself out of a situation so that you could just be. And I'm wondering, did you have art heroes that you looked up to when you were starting out, like particular artists that you admired?
Well, like I said, I was into the French Impressionism.
Oh, yes. Yep.
America's Sod, the Degas. I love the ballerinas that were done. I'm trying to think which artist it was, whether it was Monet. He's in the gardens, and this is a photograph of him with his hand wrapped with a brush in it.
Oh, yes.
And he had an assistant do that because he could no longer hold the brush. And so every time I lose the use of my hands, I think of that. It's funny how so far along ago that someone I admired is now keeping me going at this time. But I guess you don't forget those things. I loved their work. And when I had art history in college, I didn't know much art history, just reading books. They don't tell you as much as you sometimes get. But the art history course I had in college had literature, history, and art combined so that you fully understood what was going on. And suddenly you realize these beautiful paintings, the boating party in the garden and stuff. It was a time when there was infanticide, hunger, people living in the streets. It was a terrible time. And what these painters were doing was kind of like us going to the movies to lose ourselves. You could go and look at this beautiful painting and lose yourself to another world that was so much prettier.
Yeah.
And I think that's what my work did for me. When life got ugly or painful, I'd go make something pretty.
Mm.
You know, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but looking back and looking at the art of others, I now understand that that's kind of maybe what some of us do.
Well, that's wonderful that you were given that gift.
Yeah, I have had, I didn't, because I didn't have an art teacher in high school. The library brought an artist down, and you could get courses there. Course, like you go and you have a class. And he was a very nice man, and he was also into the Impressionists. That's where I learned the pastel was from him. And he had a man who would come with him who was deaf and mute, and he would have his sketchbook, and he had a pen and ink, and when he wanted to shade it, licked his thumb and wipe it over it. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, again, because he had something that was taken away in one way, he was given something in another.
Right.
And that was observation skills. Diminishing things to a very basic sketch. He drew a lot of kids at bus stops. That was one way to you find your models where you can. You know?
Reminds me of Rick. He's been doing a lot at Starbucks.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've been drawing Starbuckians.
Well, I just cleaning a house, like I say, trying to reduce, because I went from a house to a condo, and I just don't have wall space and room. I came across these two drawings I did of my son when he was like maybe, I don't know, a few months old, because he had rompers on, so he must have been walking, but he was asleep. I could never, catch actions, but I drew him asleep. Again, you take those moments when you can.
That's
Yeah, I miss being out there with other artists and being able to talk art, like with you, Rick. It's really great to share and know that other artists do look at their lives in the same way.
Yeah. It's important to let people have a dialogue with your work. I mean, it's important that you show your work and people see it and respond to it however they particularly want to respond to it.
When I did my book, The Visual Language, people asked me why my work wasn't in it. And I said it's because I wanted to focus on the designs and stuff, not my work. But I've been wanting to do a book of my work lately, and I did one of those past things on Facebook where they'll take the photos, and it's just a picture book. And my neighbor said, "Oh, you should get that published." And I'm going, well, I can't do that because it's too expensive through Facebook. And if I do it through a publisher, I need dialogue. And I can't think what dialogue. You and I can talk because you ask me questions. What I need is somebody to come and ask me questions, and then I can write the answer. Maybe that would work. I don't know. But I feel like we need. I don't know whether you said one friend said, "Well, talk about the designs." I said, "Well, I've already done that in the other book, and this is going to be a book on." I don't know how much of my own experiences to write about. Should this be a biography? Should this just be this is how I feel? I can't get a focus yet on how to go about it. But I'm getting toward 80. I better get on it.
It would be great to see a book of your work.
Well, I finally have enough, that I could do it. Before, I didn't have a lot that I thought was worthy. But I think I have enough now that I can. I'd love to do one if I ever get that show together for the stories.
I want to give the website Morningstar Studio 9, and for Jeannie Morningstar Kent, who we're talking to today, and also IndianMuseum.org is the website for the Kearsarge Indian Museum that Jeannie mentioned, and also AbenakiArt.org is another organization that Jeannie mentioned today in the interview. Okay, Rick, take it away.
Are you still doing the drawings as Carolyn tells the stories?
We had to put that up on the shelf. Carolyn had a stroke about 7 years ago.
Hi.
Yep, she's right here.
I recall.
And she sadly developed aphasia, which is a speech problem. So she has a hard time getting words and putting them out there. And so she's not able to use her honey voice that she was using to tell stories. So, and I don't go out there and just do murals myself. But Deb has been wonderful.
You are well remembered, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you.
And, and as we're talking, you lose one skill and you'll find another.
Exactly.
Yes.
So be prepared.
Yeah, she can still paint and draw.
Yes.
And she's here as a co-host. She does, she spins a lot of the music. She selects it and does the segues, and she's incredible at it.
Yes.
Hey, you already found one.
Yeah, she's a radio broadcaster right here. She runs the CD players and turns on the mics and runs the board. Yeah.
Still gives me heck.
Oh, it's so great to reconnect with you.
Yes.
I remember talking to you years ago at one of the powwows, and
I recall that.
yeah.
I miss getting up as often as we did. Like I say, we would go up. My husband would do the driving, and he loved to drive, so for him it was no problem. But he developed cancer and Parkinson's. For a man who never caught cold, it was a real blow.
Yeah.
And we struggled for about 2 years with that before Creator called him home. And it's been 6 years, and I can't even. I've only just come awake. That's why I'm just getting around to sorting things out at the house. When I moved, I took everything. So I have a lot of his things, and trying to find, people to give them to or to sell or whatever. And it's hard because most of our friends are scattered throughout New England and upward. And so trying to get things to them, is a little bit difficult.
Are you still doing some educational type work at the museums where you're living now?
No, I can empathize with Carolyn my mouth works, but my brain isn't so good. I go along and I'll have a complete blank. The fellow in Congress there, is he? I can't think of his name. Who froze on camera a couple of times. That happens to me. If I'm having a conversation with friends, they all know me and know this will happen. And they'll either give me a clue as to what I was talking about, or they'll fill in the word and help me out. But when people pay to come to a lecture, they're not going to do that. So no, I haven't been, and I miss it because even when you're teaching, you're learning. And sharing the culture, I really enjoyed that. I was a docent at the museum for Indian Museum down here for a while, and then I became a trustee, and then I stepped back from that because I'm also developing cataracts, and driving at night was a little hard to get to some of the meeting. So I've kind of been more and more recluse. I have to say that I have become more recluse, and I struggle, but I'm not dead yet.
More art to come. We just have time for closing comments. Rick, if you would like to ask a final question or make comment.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Jeannie, for being on the show. It's an honor to have you. And I'm thinking, boy, it's been a long time since I saw you. And it's great to see you here. And I hope that we can have you on again sometime.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I ever get that book done.
What would you like our listeners to take away from this conversation today, Jeannie, Morningstar Kent?
Never give up. Never give up.
Yeah.
My son was a cartoonist, and he's in his 50s now. And he's saying, "Oh, I can't do it." I said, "What do you mean you're not dead yet?" Yeah. I'll go to my grave with a pen in my hand, I swear.
Well, that's an inspiration. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's truly an honor to have you and see you on this little Zoom interview. So thank you.
Thank you both for all three of you for having me. I'm just happy to have been able to see you guys again too.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.